What's up, everybody? So today is episode 2 of my Patching with Purpose mini-series. We're gonna make some music in this one, so I'm pretty excited about it. If you haven't watched the first video, let me suggest that you go back and watch that, because in that video I kind of explain how I'm gonna approach making a piece of music on the Sound Studio and kind of give the whole framework. So go back and watch that. And then here we are. I should have also mentioned, I totally forgot in the last video, that I'm probably gonna be releasing these videos once every couple of weeks or so. I have some other things that I'm wanting to work on, and I just wanna make sure to do everything all at once. So definitely subscribe so you get notified when one of these videos comes up, and let's jump into it. Throughout all of these, we are going to develop a plan using the principles of music, which are tonality, texture, and timbre, and then we're going to use the elements of music to build up and support those ideas. I think it kind of helps sometimes when you sit down and decide what kind of music you want to make, to think about maybe some artists or music that you like, that you not necessarily want to copy or replicate, but just something that influences you. So I was recently listening to the newest album by Suzanne Ciani, along with Jonathan Fatosi. I hope I pronounced that right. If I butchered it, I'm so sorry. She just released this album, Golden Apples of the Sun. I really like her work. I've listened to a bunch of her stuff. And in particular, on this album, there's a song called Pinwheel that just really stuck out to me. And I've listened to it a whole bunch of times and I really love it. So for me, to describe the tonality, texture, and timbre of that song, I would say that it has a happy feel to it, but it's almost like a bittersweet happiness. It's not like Sesame Street happiness, but it is happy and pleasant. It's somewhat ambient, but not necessarily a soundscape. It's peaceful and has a kind of nostalgic quality to it. It's perfect for fall. There's a feeling of reflection, or like the end of a period of time or something. I don't know. I don't want to get too carried away with it, but that's where it hits me. If I think about the texture of it, it's a lot of smooth textures. There's a lot of space in between the notes, so it's very sparse. There's some subtle reverb in there, but overall, it's not this like in your face abrasiveness to it. And finally, the timbre of the instruments, there's a sort of woodiness to them. There's a smoothness to it. It's a very organic feeling. Like, I think she's using synths and not samples, but if she were to be using samples, I could see it being like wood blocks or something like that. So that's the kind of feel that we're going for. That's the texture that we're going for. That's the timbre that we're going for. And we don't have to necessarily stick exactly to that, but we're gonna use that as our frame of reference, so that way when we go down through the elements, we're gonna make decisions on those that are based upon that initial choice. So let's head over to the Sound Studio and we'll go down methodically through rhythm, melody, harmony, etc. to build up a patch that has those qualities. All right, let's head over. So our first element of music is rhythm. So now we have to think about how rhythm is going to support the principles and elements that I was talking about earlier. So one of the things that makes the Sound Studio so unique is the rhythmical possibilities, especially of the subharmonicon. The sub is really designed with polyrhythms in mind, and I'm going to explore some of those ideas in a different video. In this piece, I want to keep things really simple rhythmically because I want things to be really sparse, and we're going to focus on melody and harmony in this video. So right now, let's just design a really simple rhythm. So I'm going to start with the Defam. We're going to be thinking about a peaceful sound, so we don't want anything too abrasive. I'm going to turn down my noise level. We'll make sure that the noise VCF mod is turned off. I'm going to start just by getting a kick or a kind of thud sound on the first hit. And just to keep it a little bit, having more of some movement to it, let's patch in pitch to noise. See if we can get a sort of like maybe a snare or hi-hat hit kind of sound on the 5. That could be good. Either way, that's a nice simple rhythm in the Defam that we can use. We can develop it later, but I think that's a good starting point. Let's head on down to the mother. Let's start with just the rhythm. Let's keep it simple, have a 16-step sequence. And this rhythm, let's just keep it straight 16th notes, just all the way through. Right now, there's not a sequence plugged in, so that's what it'll sound like. And if we hear it together, I might even slow it down a little bit just to give a little bit more space. Awesome. All right, let's program rhythms down in the sub. What I wanted to do was, again, keep it super simple. So I'm gonna stick to even numbered divisions of the clock. So the first one is 8 and the second one is 2. So what that means is that for every 8 steps of the mother sequence, this light is going to go once forward. So here, if we plug it in, you can watch how that plays out. It's interesting that you can kind of hear some adjustments in pitch when the sequencer shut off. It's kind of fascinating. So I guess that's one of those things about analog synths like this, is you never really know what you're gonna get, I guess. It still sounds pretty cool. All right, so that's gonna be our basic rhythm. Let's talk about the melody, because that's something that I wanna focus on this video. So let's go back up to the mother and program in a sequence. So again, going back to our tonality decision, we're trying to keep things happy and pleasant. So we're gonna, of course, pick a major key or mode to compose in. So we're gonna use the Lydian mode. I think Lydian offers a kind of mysterious blend of happiness. It's one of my favorite modes to compose in. I just think it's great, especially with this kind of music. So to change a typical major scale from a major scale to a Lydian mode, all you have to do is sharp the 4. So to keep things simple, let's compose in C. We'll compose in C Lydian, and because we know that C is just all of the white notes on a keyboard, the 4th is F. So if we sharp that, we get F sharp. So our notes would be, rather than here's the major scale, and here's the Lydian mode. Now, of course, you're not going to hear a huge difference if you just play up and down the scale like that. But as we compose, if we really emphasize that F sharp, because that's our Lydian note, it'll really come out in the whole mood of the song. So we have 3 sequencers to work with. We have the mother, we have, we could use the Defam actually, we might in a later video, but right now the Defam is just going to be holding down the fort for rhythm. But we also have the sequencer 1 of the sub and sequencer 2 of the sub. We could have chords or imply chords, have a bass line, things like that. The sub definitely lends itself really well to those types of things. But since in this video, I wanted to talk more about melody, let's take another approach and do a sort of counterpoint. 3 simple melodies that imply a harmonic structure by making melodic lines that contrast with each other. So let's start with the mother and think about melody in terms of rising and falling in our Lydian mode. So we'll have the first part of the sequence going up in steps. Let's go up in thirds. And there's that F sharp. And now that we're halfway through, let's just make a falling descending line. All right. Now for the next part, the second half of our 16 steps, let's start it out the same exact way so it repeats a little bit. Cool. And this time, let's have it be a rising line. All right, let's just hear what that sounds like. Cool. And that's just basically rising and falling. It's very simple. It has repeating patterns. It emphasizes the first two notes, emphasize that we're in a major mode by going from the tonic to a major third. And we're also making use of that F sharp. It comes up 3 times in the 16-step sequence. Let's also, while we're here, let's make it a little bit more rhythmically interesting and emphasize that simple rhythm. So I'm gonna go into step mode and let's just put accents on the downbeats. So you press shift in the first note and we'll go ahead and put an accent, then shift in the 5th note and we'll put an accent. We'll go back to the other set and shift in the first note, we'll put an accent, and shift in the 5th note, put an accent. And you can tell that the accent goes on right there. Let's just, while we're here, put in a ratchet as well. Let's go ahead and put it on the very first step of the second half of the sequence. So how we do that is you hold down shift and you turn up the glide button and we'll just put 2 ratchets on there. There we go. Cool. All right, so we got our mother down. Let's come up with some interesting melodies on the sub that will provide counterpoint to that melody. So first of all, we're gonna be working in 12 steps, equal temperament right here because we're not in the key of C major. Now we have choices of waveforms. Because I wanted this to be a softer, more pleasant piece, I'm going to choose the saw wave. I could also choose the pulse wave. I want to avoid the one in the middle where the pulse wave is modulated by the saw wave because I think that sounds very aggressive and hard. This sound, that could sound very nice and bell-like, but I think like this is what we're going to use for our timbre. This is what's going to fit in with that kind of softness. So I've got this tuned to C just because it's easy to control. So both of these, I should note that when I'm working with the sub, often what I want to do when I'm programming it is turn down all of the oscillators but the specific one I'm working. So let's listen to just VCO1. And this is tuned to C. And I actually used a tuner to make sure that that was C. But you could also do it by ear. And my sub 1 frequency and my sub 2 frequencies, what I've done is I've taken a look at the subharmonics chart and I created a giant unison chord. So this is the 8th subdivision, this is the 4th subdivision, and those are also C. So this is right now just sub 1. So I've got a giant C unison over 3 different octaves. I've also done the same exact thing with the right-hand side with VCO2. If I turn down all of these and listen to just VCO2, you can hear that it's just one giant unison. What that means is that I can actually make the counterpoint with the sequencer, and we can use our mixer when we get down to the form section to kind of change up things and have different octaves coming in and out, and that's a great way to mix up your form. For right now, let's just turn down all the oscillators by VCO1 so we can program in our melody. So if you remember from the mother that the melody was stepped up at first and then a descending line, and then the second half of the sequence was stepped up and an ascending line. So what I'm gonna do on these two sequencers is have it go in and out in support and contrast with those. I'm gonna have sequencer 1 being an ascending line, and I'll have sequencer 2 being a descending line. So now we have a nice variety of falling and rising and steps and things like that. So all three sequencers are kind of doing different things. I also want to make sure that that F sharp, the Lydian note, the one that gives the tonality, is included in both the rising and falling. So let's play it out. So I'm going to turn on the sequencer for number 1, and we'll just methodically go through each note of the sequencer, only VCO1 tuned up. I know that that rings out a C. That's a D, E, F sharp. So we got our F sharp. We've also got the C and the E that create that major triad. Let's program in our descending line on sequencer 2. So I'm going to turn down VCO1 and turn up VCO2. Now this one I have to make a little bit of a jump at the beginning because I want to make sure to include that F sharp. So I'm going to go from a C, we'll go down to G, then to F sharp, and then to E. Because I want to make sure to, number 1, we have a C, an E, and a G in there, which gives us the notes of our tonic, which is a C chord, but we also have that F sharp in there because that's our Lydian note. That's what's going to give us that sort of mysterious feel. So let's listen to what just those two sequences sound like when they're going without anything else. So you can already kind of hear how just with those sequences from the sub, we're starting to get that kind of, it's not sad, but it's not necessarily Sesame Street happy. It is that kind of reflective kind of happiness. Pretty cool stuff. I actually think that those sounds were really great for this. It's very plucky. I have the VCA decay up to kind of give it a little bit of airiness, but then the VCF decay is really tight. So the envelope is super tight. Cutoff is really low, but I have the envelope turned up. So every time it kicks in, you hear the cutoff open up a little bit. So I have a little bit of reverb going on this, and you can really hear the tail end. It just gives that nice space. It gives it room to breathe. I just really like that sound. So in fact, actually, let's move up to the mother and see if we can program in something similar to that sound. Let's do the same thing where we're gonna have the VCF mod source on the envelope, and we'll turn that up and our cutoff way down. Let's put it here. I'm going to turn the sustain off so we're just hearing the envelopes. I'm also going to leave this one as a pulse wave. When the envelope is set with the sustain off, I think it gives it a little bit more like a bell-like tone. I think that will fit this the mood of this piece really well. That's sounding really good. Let's, oh, this is cool. So now we're gonna plug in the sub. I'm just gonna reset everything and see what we get out of it. So let's talk a little bit about dynamics. This is something I've kind of alluded to throughout, that I want there to be a lot of sparseness. I want there to be a lot of space. And I don't want it to be in your face loud. So that's something that I just need to make sure that everything has a nice balanced feel to all of the synths, and that as I say open up a cutoff, I'll close something else out so that everything dynamically will kind of go together. So, you know, there's kind of a lot of overlap between dynamics and texture because I wanted that kind of smooth, nice, light feeling to it. And of course, to get that with dynamics, we're going to keep it really spacey. We're going to keep it with a lot of different space, and that means short envelopes and in a slower tempo, just to kind of keep things spacious. That's cool. Okay, so last but certainly not least is the form. And this is probably the most important aspect of taking a patch like this, because this is already just a great patch. Taking this patch and turning it into a piece of music, or taking a simple groove and turning it into an actual piece of music or song. We'll need to figure out how to make movements or sections with what we already have. Now, in traditional music, that's kind of nice and easy. You could just write a different chord progression or a different verse or different melody. With the Sound Studio and with modular, that could present some challenges or limitations, especially if you're not using MIDI or a DAW or some type of advanced sequencer to control it. But we still have a lot of options, and sometimes I think those limitations can lead to better creative choices. So there's all kinds of different things you can do, but again, for this patch, we were focused on that melody part with the counterpoint. So I don't want to do too much in terms of form. We'll have another video down the road where we really focus in on making a more elaborate form. But for right now, we just really need to have a sort of beginning, a middle, an end, and have that planned out. What I like to do sometimes is actually sit down and write where I'm going to start, what the actual knobs I'm going to twist to create different sections, to have it rise and sort of peak, and then where I'm going to end up. And I actually write these down in notes. We're going to start off with that simple sequence that was going from the subharmonicon, just the melodies on top with none of the subharmonics. The Defam's going to sit out, the mother's going to sit out. When we were programming that, I really liked that sound, and I want to start there. What I'm going to do is actually close off the envelope and the cutoffs, maybe turn down the volumes of everything, and when I start it, it's really beautiful, and I think it sets the tone of everything that we're going to be going for. So that's going to be our starting point. I'm also going to end there. That's where we're going to end up. So I'm going to write that down as the sub melodies with no subharmonics. Now, how do we build this up? I'm going to start by adding in the mother before we even bring in the Defam. So let's go ahead and just try that. Now, of course, too, I want to be thinking about the dynamics. I don't want it to get louder or overpower. I want it to mix nicely within the other sequence. We're sharing this melody space. The next part is I'm going to add in the Defam and sub 1 at the same time. So that means that sort of a bass note and the rhythm section will kick in at the same time. So I have to open up the cutoff to the Defam. I'm going to let that settle for a little bit. Let's lower this sequence by an octave by turning this down fast and this up fast. And it changes the entire mood. It creates a new section. Let's do the same over here. And I'm going to slowly raise this one. We'll tighten up the VCF decay a little bit. And we'll open up the VCA decay on the let the mother sequence shine out for a little bit. Close the decay on the mother fast with the decay with the amp envelope of the Defam. And then bring back in our melodies of the subharmonicon. We'll lower the envelope of the mother. And I'm actually going to cut the Defam and sub 1 level at the same time to leave us back where we started. I'm going to let it go around a couple times. Let's see if I can stop it right on the 1. Here we go. And there we go. We have a finished piece of music. Now I played around with that before making this video and really wrote out all those parts. But since I've written them now, I can go back and practice it. I can rehearse it. And I can maybe do a couple of different takes, play around with the tempo a little bit. For the EP, I'm going to go back into it and make a recording of it using that arrangement, that form. So that's it. If you like this kind of video, definitely subscribe. Let me know in the comment section. I really appreciate comments. I'm going to put out the next video I'm probably going to focus on rhythm, and we'll make an entirely different piece of music, but with the same kind of thoughtful methodology, so that way we can make a cohesive piece of music. But that it's just going to sound a little bit different because we'll be focusing on rhythm rather than a simple counterpoint melody. All right, thanks so much for watching. Check out my Patreon page, do all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you next time.